Dr. Elias Moran liked sleep. He liked its neat boundaries, the clear stages that could be mapped on an EEG, the way a patient's chaos could be translated into smooth rolling waves. Night after night, behind the thick glass of his clinic's observation room, he watched strangers surrender to the sweet and measurable quiet of Delta sleep. What he loved most, though, was the thought that whatever nightmares surfaced could be soothed and explained. Sleep, for Elias, was a locked door with a clear key. That certainty began to fracture the night Claire Farrell arrived. Claire was 32, a pianist with a trembling hand. She had driven into oncoming traffic after, she said, somebody whispered it would be okay. The police dismissed it as a suicide attempt. Her family insisted she wasn't depressed. She was referred to Elias because she swore the whisper had come from a dream that had bled into waking life. During their first session, she clasped a paper cup of water so tight it crinkled. "He kept telling me," she said. "He said, 'Claire, trust me. There's room.' I could hear him even after my eyes were open." "Who is he?" Elias asked. She hesitated, then smiled with embarrassed affection. "Levi," she said, as if introducing a shy cousin hiding behind her chair. "He's been around since I was little." Elias dutifully wrote the name, but felt a small sting of disappointment. Adults sometimes clung to childhood personae under extreme stress. Eventually, Levi would fade. The case was interesting, but nothing revolutionary. 2 weeks later, an elderly retired librarian named Timothy Cho arrived for treatment of violent night terrors. He had woken to find himself straddling his wife, thumbs pressed to her windpipe. The old man wept as he told the story, overwhelming guilt flushing his cheeks. "I could feel someone guiding my hands," he confessed. "A friend, only he isn't really a friend. He calls himself Levi." Elias's pen stilled. He looked up, searching Timothy's face for laughter or recognition. There was none. Coincidence, he decided, until a third patient appeared. Marisol Diaz, a high school chemistry teacher, had been caught trying to replace the cleaning staff's bleach with concentrated hydrochloric acid. As the police escorted her off campus, she kept jabbering about a companion standing just left of the sun. In Elias's office, voice hollow, she repeated the name. "Levi said I had to prove I could change the world's composition." 3 unrelated adults, all naming the same imaginary presence. Elias replayed each intake recording, scrutinizing the diction. Claire's Levi spoke in soothing assurances. Timothy's offered instructions in a dusty baritone. Marisol's hissed secret formulas in a voice made of television static. Yet each patient insisted the name, insisted the loyalty, insisted the friend was more real than memory and more intimate than blood. Elias dug into case histories and found nothing interconnecting. Different cities, ethnicities, age brackets, psych profiles. They had not attended the same schools, houses of worship, or online forums. Nor had Levi existed in folklore, comics, or viral marketing campaigns. There were mythical Levis, but none matched the entity coaxing people toward cruelty. He tried to reason with himself. Maybe the shared name was like the archetypal shadow Jung wrote about, or a subconscious protest against modern Nami. Yet he kept returning to the bruises on Timothy's wife's neck, and the acid burn on the janitor's mop bucket. Ordinary pathology did not normally synchronize so perfectly. When the 4th patient arrived, Elias began to lose sleep of his own. Sergeant Devon Murtaugh, recently returned from his 3rd deployment, had bludgeoned his service dog to death with a coffee mug. Military psychologists labeled it a dissociative episode. Devon, trembling in Elias's office, whispered, "He told me the dog was lying. He told me the dog didn't really love me." "Who told you?" "Levi, Dr. Moran, the only guy who's always honest." Elias ended the session early. He walked to the clinic's break room, poured stale coffee, and stared at the swirling liquid as if it could reveal answers. He knew what he should do: document the anomaly, submit it to the psychiatric journal, alert colleagues to a fascinating repetition, but fascination felt wrong. People were getting hurt. He instituted an experiment. Each of the 4 patients would spend 2 nights in the lab, electrodes taped to their scalps, heart and respiration monitored in real time. Elias designed a prompt. As soon as they entered REM, a pre-programmed audio recording of his voice would ask, "Is Levi present?" If yes, the patient should dream speak or signal via their eyelid code. If no, they should remain still. The first night, Claire's REM period bloomed at 2:07 a.m. Her eyelids fluttered Morse for yes. Her heart rate spiked. The lab recorder captured faint speech. "He's here." "What does he look like?" Elias's voice asked through the headphone embedded in her sleep mask. Claire murmured indistinct syllables. Then, "Shiny." At 3:24, Timothy's REM began. He answered yes. Asked to describe Levi, Timothy said with surprising clarity, "He wears a paper mouth." Marisol, at 3:51, described hands made of lines. Devon, at 4:16, said, "He's wearing your coat, Doc." Elias, listening to live feeds, felt his skin prickle. He scribbled descriptive fragments on a pad. Shiny, paper mouth, lines, my coat, none cohered. Yet each patient's vitals surged in uncanny synchrony, breathing shallow at precisely 18 breaths per minute, skin temperature dropping 2 degrees. It was as if an external thermostat had been adjusted. Night 2, he altered the script. Rather than ask them to describe Levi, he instructed, "Tell Levi we do not consent to his presence." Each subject reacted violently. Claire thrashed, tearing electrodes from her scalp. Devon bolted upright, head whipping left to right. Marisol's blood pressure spiked so high the medical alarm shrieked. Timothy flatlined for a terrifying 9 seconds before recovering. Elias had to abort the session. After the chaos subsided, he sat alone amid coiled wires and the stink of sterile gel, sweating through his dress shirt. A single sentence echoed, "We do not consent." The phrase had triggered physical rebellion in bodies separated by 50 feet of hallway and walls of soundproofing. It felt as though he had poked something huge and unseen. He drove home near dawn, city streets gray and empty. Every red light lingered too long, and in the hush of idling engines, he kept expecting a stranger to tap on his window. Once inside his apartment, he drew every curtain and, exhausted, collapsed on the couch. The room buzzed faintly, refrigerator hum blended with traffic. Sleep came like a blackout. He dreamed of a corridor lined with doors made of white noise. A figure waited at the far end, shimmering like heat above asphalt. Elias approached, and the figure stepped toward him, wearing a moment of crystalline dread. His own lab coat, scorched at the edges. Its face was blank skin, mouth cut from lined notebook paper, crudely folded into a smile. Shiny black ink traced the smile's outline. It said his name not in sound but in a pressure against the inside of his skull. Elias. He woke, hands clawed at his chest, nails leaving crescent wounds. The apartment was dim afternoon, the digital clock blinking 3:33. He tasted blood where he'd bitten his tongue. Trembling, he recorded the experience into his phone. "I have become a patient," he said. "Levi has crossed the threshold." Ordinary practice demanded he refer himself to another clinician and step back from treatment, but ordinary practice seemed hilariously inadequate. If Levi was a shared delusion, it was contagious. If Levi was real, he couldn't finish the sentence. Elias returned to the clinic. He ordered the night staff to go home, citing a gas leak drill. By 10 p.m., he was alone with banks of monitors and 4 sedatives prepped in syringes. He dosed himself, affixed electrodes, and initiated self-observation. His plan was audacious and foolish. Confront Levi in controlled conditions, impose therapeutic interrogation, and record everything. The sedation pulled him under quickly. Again the corridor of doors. Again the blank-faced figure. But now he was lucid, aware. He stated, in the measured cadence he used with patience, "Levi, you are an intrusion. Explain your purpose." The figure's paper smile widened, ink lines stretching. The answer rolled into his mind like oil spill. "I tidy loose ends." Whose loose ends? The doors along the corridor flickered, revealing glimpses. Claire behind a steering wheel, blinking tears. Timothy hovering above his wife, confusion twisting his features. Marisol shaking acid onto tiled floors. Devin sobbing over a battered golden retriever. Then, a final door showed Elias hunched in the clinic, chewing the skin of his thumb until it bled. Their sadness, Levi pressed, is unorganized. I reorganize. They hurt people, Elias insisted. Necessary scaffolding for the new architecture. He felt a terrible vertigo, as if Levi were rearranging the hallway itself. Doors dissolved into floating frames, pivoting around him in impossible geometry. Elias forced himself to recall a grounding technique. Name 5 real-world sounds. But in the dream there were none, so he recited instead 5 patients: Claire, Timothy, Marisol, Devin, Elias, and clung to those names like ladder rungs. "Release them," he ordered. Levi tilted its head, the paper smile tearing slightly to reveal darkness behind. Then the creature stretched one hand of writhing black lines and gently touched Elias's forehead. The sensation was both cold and scalding. Images poured in, crowds moving in patterns, each individual guided by invisible filaments, wars triggered by whispers seated in insomnia, whole civilizations pruned like bonsai for aesthetic arrangement. Levi was no friend. Levi was a custodian of chaos disguised as order. Elias felt his will disintegrate. In that moment, he discerned the lethal seduction the patients had faced, a sense of cosmic tidiness amid personal disorder. He understood why they obeyed. Everything could make sense if you allowed Levi to plan the story. He screamed himself awake. It took minutes to untangle lines from his limbs. Heart racing, he checked the data. The EEG showed a burst pattern unlike any he had recorded, simultaneous spikes across frontal, temporal, and occipital lobes lasting 13 seconds, impossible under normal neurophysiology. The machinery itself looked bruised, plastic casing warped by an unexplained heat. The clinic's phone rang. Whatever sliver of calm he possessed shattered at the sound. He picked up. Claire's mother sobbed on the line. Claire had disappeared after leaving a note, gone to clean the mistakes. Police suspected suicidal intent. Elias promised to call back. Minutes later, Marisol's school principal left a voicemail. She had slipped out of her house with a duffel bag of lab reagents. Timothy's son rang to say his father had purchased rope and turned off his phone. Devin's neighbor reported hearing screams in a breaking window. 4 crises, simultaneous. He should call emergency services. He should. Instead, he stood frozen, Levi's final image etched behind his eyes, necessary scaffolding. If Levi was orchestrating a multi-branch tragedy, maybe he could jam the signal by targeting the conduit himself. Elias paged through the clinic's medications. Among them was etomidate, a powerful sedative used for rapid anesthesia induction, doses calculated by weight. A large enough bolus could induce a near-death state, a liminal zone of brain activity that might, theoretically, intercept Levi on its own turf. He filled his syringe, calculated half again the recommended maximum, and lay on the observation bed, phone camera recording. His last conscious act was to press send on a message to his research partner across town. "If I don't contact you by dawn, call 911 and burn the clinic." The darkness swallowed him without corduroy or doors. He drifted in perfect void. In the distance he sensed Levi approaching, drawn by the abrupt vacancy of his consciousness. Elias gathered his remaining will and pictured a boundary, a circle of chalk on a blackboard, something childhood simple. He placed within it the names Claire, Timothy, Marisol, Devin. He fortified the circle with his own name, etched in fire. Levi arrived, vast and glinting, like a skyscraper unfolding out of the dark. It pressed against the chalk line, testing. Ink smile dripping, it whispered. "Disorder outside becomes order within. Step aside." "No," Elias said, amazed he could still speak. "They belong to themselves." He felt Levi's weight, a tidal gravity attempt to tilt him. His legs buckled, the chalk line cracked. Through the fissure he glimpsed Claire on a bridge railing, Timothy tying a knot, Marisol pouring acid into a water tower, Devin raising a shard of glass to his throat. Time stuttered. One more flake of chalk would crumble and they would be lost. Elias remembered suddenly the 5-sound grounding exercise. But here, in this dead expanse, there were no sounds. So he invented them. He summoned Claire's laughter at finding a perfect piano chord, Timothy's voice reciting a line of poetry, Marisol's gasp when a student solved a tricky equation, Devin's low hum while petting his dog, and for the fifth, Elias conjured his own surprised chuckle at falling asleep in the break room during residency, drool on the textbook. The imagined noises rang out like bells. Levi reeled, ink lines splintering. Elias lunged, shoving the creature away from the circle. It stumbled, if such a being could stumble, and began to collapse into itself, folding dimension upon dimension, until only a scrap of paper remained, fluttering in a non-existent breeze. He seized that scrap, tore it to confetti, and let the pieces dissolve. Light flooded the void. The hospital ceiling swam into focus. Elias gagged, rolling off the observation bed. Ivy ripped from his arm. Sirens wailed out. He crawled to the window and saw police lights converging on distant points across the city. His phone buzzed with texts. Claire found, weeping but unharmed on the bridge. Timothy located by officers before he could use the rope. Marisol apprehended at the school's maintenance shed. Devin in the ER with minor cuts. The glass forgotten on the floor. He did not know whether their salvation was coincidence, intervention by first responders, or some psychic aftershock of his confrontation. He only knew they were alive. In the following weeks, the 4 patients reported an uncanny silence. They slept dreamless or dreamed mundane scenes, grocery aisles, park benches, rainy windows. None heard Levi's voice again. Therapy shifted to rebuilding rather than resisting. They practiced cognitive techniques for intrusive thoughts. They volunteered at shelters and recitals and libraries to replenish what they had nearly destroyed. Their EEGs returned to normal parameters. Elias, however, remained restless. Sometimes in the hum fluorescent lights, he sensed a faint rustle, as though a page were turning where no book was open. On those nights, he walked the corridors of the clinic, checking locks and whispering the names of his patients like passwords. He published a paper, sanitized and technical, on concurrent one-eric hallucinations among unrelated subjects. The reviewers called it provocative and demanded replication. He declined. He changed his specialty from sleep medicine to palliative care, preferring now the honest threshold of life's end to the murky gates of dreams. Yet occasionally, when twilight settles and the world grows blurry, he catches himself arranging pencils into perfect parallel lines or folding a scrap of paper into an unearned smile. In those moments he feels the tug of distant architecture, the promise that everything can still be reorganized, and he has to breathe steady and slow to remember that not every loose end needs tidying and not every whisper deserves to be heard.